SoundCartel.
So often it's the ones you least expect that go on to do incredible things, like becoming groundbreaking entrepreneurs, living a life of fast-paced risk and reward, and years later, it's hard to imagine them doing anything else. From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. Entrepreneurs are an unusual lot, bouncing from one pursuit to another, clinging on tightly to the rollercoaster ride of venture capitalism, and failure is as much a part of their road to success as anything. One entrepreneur who's faced his fair share of setbacks over his lifetime is Alan Manley, CEO of Group Colleges Australia. He spent decades in the private education sector. He's been a leader in a modern approach to education. He's faced disasters along the way, money, relationships, and most incredibly, being pursued relentlessly by a vexatious litigant for 10 years, with 250 court appearances, including the High Court of Australia. The incredible journey is captured in Alan's Seat of Your Pants book, The Unlikely Entrepreneur. So why does he call himself the unlikely entrepreneur? Alan Manley explains to Chris Ashmore.
I was the son of a dirt farm, a very, very small property that wasn't really financially viable. And our mother, a church-going lady of quite knowledge in things of religion and such beliefs. And her goal for my brother and I was to get a job with the government. And the reason for that was you usually make the assumption, don't you, that each generation would like better for their own children, the next generation to be better than your journey. So her aspiration was a government job. And that presented itself as my brother and I ended up being postmen. We were obliged to leave school. He left school at 14 because it was legal, and I left school at 15. My mother was quite narked about that the interfering government had made me stay at school an extra year. She could see no value in that at all when you can go and get yourself a perfectly good government job that would clothe you in safety grey. Postmen in those days wore safety grey and rode a red push bike in the traffic. It does give me a smile these days. So with that upbringing of, some would say aiming low, but actually she's aiming high. It's a matter of where your perspective is. So she thought that was a better deal. So I can remember she's highly excited. We got this uniform, big brown box of uniforms, and she thought that was good and you got a government job and they probably never sack you. So that was my upbringing. So how would you get an entrepreneurial attitude out of that? Well, that's what I think is pretty unlikely.
Now, you spent a lot of your business life as a leader in the education sector. Why there particularly, Alan?
Well, look, I sometimes wonder. It's a journey. Business is a journey. You take opportunities. And any industry, I think it takes about 2 years to learn about an industry, a year to learn, a year to do. I came from the IT industry, computers and software and things like that. And I accidentally drifted into, would you believe, a college that taught computer programmers. Now, I thought that was a pretty natural mix because I knew the industry. So we employed people to train programmers, and then I would get them jobs because I knew people in the industry. And that wasn't that hard. So that sort of accidentally got me into the education sector. And then from there, I worked out pretty quickly that international education was a booming business. And so when I first joined international education, which is international education in Australia was opened up in 1986. 10 years later, it became a bigger operation. I joined it around about 99. So it's 20-something years now. It's grown from a couple of $100 million to $40 billion business. And we've followed along that. It's been an interesting journey. But you end up in a situation where you acquire skills, you get understanding. And part of the thing I think I mentioned in my book a bit, that I had been blessed by having a Chinese godfather. And the market that opened up in those days was China. So I had an understanding, not a knowledge so much as a passive understanding that people could be different and still be right. So I went to China. I was very successful. We got more Chinese students than others compared to everything else. So that made, having entered the education sector, which wasn't a natural fit in my opinion, we did computer courses, and that evolved 20 years later to being a business course that became an MBA. Master of Business Admin for Entrepreneurs.
Is the education sector, is that evolving? Is it, or are we still stuck in the old ways of the way we educate people?
If you look at the newspapers lately, in the last 6 months, universities have been traumatised. And they're not traumatised by COVID-19, in my narrow view. They're traumatised by change. What's this thing called change? I could mock them endlessly. The average person in the education industry has never left school. Think about it. They were gifted, talented, and got employed in the same campus. As one Minister for Education said once, there's only one university in Australia and it has 42 different campuses. It's got the one union, the one salary award, the one Australian standards for Australian qualification framework for degrees are all set to the one. It's almost a monolithic type organisation, so it's not really keen on change. So COVID-19 has introduced change to them. That's what's really hit them. And they're utterly traumatised. Can you imagine something like Melbourne University or Sydney University are shocked that when they put all their eggs into one basket called China and it collapsed, it's gone bad. And these people make one of their biggest profit lines is business courses, MBAs, marketing.
Yep.
They weren't reading their own textbooks.
Now, in your book, you have 50 specific messages or tips from your entrepreneurial career. Now, of course, we can't go through all of them, but would you be able to provide some of your favourite gems?
My favourite one is cash flow. That is, I preach that all the time. The way you'll measure your success will be cash flow. If there's more cash coming in than going out, you're probably making a wage. And then when you make more of a wage, if you can afford to employ people, you may then have an entrepreneurial type business that's scalable. So I preach cash flow. My other one, I think all you need for business is a customer. You've got to find someone who loves you. You've got to find someone who's prepared to pay you for what you're about. Whatever service you offer, someone's got to be prepared to pay for it. Now, you can get customers, you get friends and family and all that when they set up, but you're almost better to get a total stranger. You'll have a better business relationship with a total stranger than you will a friend or someone like that. So what you need for a business is a customer. And then perhaps later on, you then conclude that you need more than one customer, because otherwise if you've only got one customer, you're still really a wage slave and you're locked yourself in. But it can still work. But I do think it's all about getting a customer. The customer is the most important thing in business. So I was asked recently about how important staff are. Well, staff are very important. So is the product. But I have had the experience where I advertise in a newspaper and say, good job, 80,000 and 100,000 or 200,000, whatever the company will pay, I get applicants. And when I try and get customers, I spend an enormous amount of money just trying to get one customer to ring me to say they'd like to give me some money. I find it easier to employ people than to find customers.
To finish up with, Alan, if you could go back in time and give yourself some advice as you start out in life, what would it be?
Well, probably starting out, what would I do? I probably would have been braver. Coming from my background, I wasn't very confident. And I think today business is easier to set up, and this is an old man to young people, but probably be brave. I think I chickened out of a lot of opportunities that when I look back, I think I could have done it if I'd been a little braver.
That was Alan Manley, author of The Unlikely Entrepreneur. To purchase a copy, head to the link in this episode's show notes. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow @BE Daily Podcast across social media and head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast. SoundCartel.